Hi, hello. My name's Tanya Landman, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about my very, very latest book. I've written a lot of books now for young children, with picture books, right the way through till to young adults and adults. This one is my very, very latest, and this one, as you can see, is called Midwinter Burning. Now, it's a really exciting thing when you've been working on a book for a good few months, and it does take a while to write a book. When it finally arrives, the finished copy suddenly comes through the post, and it lands on the doormat, and you open the package, and you find something like this inside, all beautifully kind of printed, and with this magnificent cover by a guy called Tom Cole. And it's a bit like kind of having a new baby in the house all of a sudden. You want to kind of carry it around and show it to everyone and get them to admire it. So please do that for me. His cover actually kind of gives you some clues about what the whole story is about. If you look at the sky here, you can see there's an aeroplane. But if you look really, really, really closely, you might be able to make out that's not just any old aeroplane. That's actually a fighter plane. That's a Spitfire. So that kind of gives you a clue that this is maybe set in the Second World War. The other clues that you've got here on the cover are that up there on the headland, on the cliff, there's a stone circle. Maybe not as big as Stonehenge, but just as mysterious and powerful. And there you have these two boys running towards the stones. And then you've got the title, all in lovely, beautiful gold foil, which I do love a bit of gold foil. Look at that glimmer. The title, Midwinter Burning. Now, the Midwinter Burning is actually a village tradition in this book, and it's when all the villagers have a torchlit procession and they march from the village up to the standing stones where they have a bonfire, and they do that every year in the middle of winter. So the longest, darkest night, that's when they have the Midwinter Burning. But this book features a boy called Alfie. Alfie, at the start of the book, he lives in London, but then because the war is about to break out, he gets evacuated down to Devon. And for a lot of the people he gets evacuated with, that's really distressing for them. They're leaving their homes and their families and going somewhere completely strange. But for Alfie, because he's never really been that happy at home, it's actually really exciting. And when he gets to Devon, he ends up living on this beautiful farm with this wonderful woman who calls herself Auntie Bell. And he's really, really happy. He's never been happier. And for the very first time in his life, he actually makes a friend. And the friend is here on the cover. The friend is called, that one's Alfie, this one's Smidge. But as that friendship develops, Alfie begins to realise there are some kind of slightly strange and troubling things about Smidge, and he can't ask him what's going on in Smidge's life because Smidge doesn't actually speak English. So although they have this beautiful friendship, it's difficult, to actually find out what's going on. And as the book goes on, he starts to wonder more and more about Smidge, and then one day he can't find Smidge. Smidge has disappeared, and Alfie starts to discover and to think that maybe Smidge's disappearance is to do with the whole tradition of the Midwinter Burning up at the stones. So I'm going to read you a little bit from near the beginning. This is actually the day when war has been declared, and they've been to church, because that's what people used to do back then. They've all been to church on Sunday, and after the service, all the grown-ups are standing in the graveyard and they're talking. And this first person to talk is the wonderful Auntie Bell. Auntie Bell said, "I was wondering, your ladyship, maybe we should put our thinking caps on. We shan't be able to have the Midwinter Burning this year, shall we? Not with the war on and the blackout and such. Perhaps we should do something else, for the children, like. Cheer us all up when 'tis dark and gloomy. A nice party, maybe?" "If we are to do anything at all," the vicar said, overhearing her and coming over, "let us make it something appropriate to the Christian calendar. We're not heathens, after all. I suggest a nativity play." A shout cut through all the chatter in the graveyard. "The burning! We've got to have the burning!" Everyone fell silent and turned to look at the man who'd shouted. He was old, frail-looking, but his eyes were blazing with rage. His hand was resting on the shoulder of the boy who'd been glaring at Billy Figgs in church. The old man was using him like a walking stick. Sour-faced Mrs. Copper was a step or two behind. "Morning," said Auntie Bell brightly. Her mouth was smiling, but her eyes told a different story. "Mr. Copper, Mrs. Copper," and then to the boy, "Morning, Joe." Looking back at the old man, she asked, "Who's your lumbago this morning?" Mr. Copper completely ignored her. "We gotta have the burning," he told the vicar. "The burning's old, older than the church, older than Jesus even. We gotta find some way of doing it, war or no war, or else the darkness shall come, and then where will we be?" Alfie felt a prickle of alarm. Something felt odd. When Auntie Bell had first told him about the Midwinter Burning, she'd talked about dark nights, the year turning and spring coming back. It had sounded normal, natural. But when Mr. Copper mentioned the darkness, it sounded sinister, as if the word had a capital D, like the darkness was a thing, a power maybe, or a creature with a will of its own. The words were out of Alfie's mouth before he knew he wanted to ask the question. "What's the darkness?" Mr. Copper blinked at the interruption, and his blazing eyes found Alfie. He grinned, but there was nothing friendly in that look. It was more like one of Lady Atherington's dogs baring its teeth. "You don't want to know that," Mr. Copper said softly. "Lonely little lad like you. Best hope you never find out." So there you go. I'll finish it there. Thanks very much for listening. And I really loved writing this book. I loved Smidge and I loved Alfie. And I hope that you will love reading this and love the characters as much as I do. Thanks for listening. Bye.